Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Christopher Lebrun. I'm the president of the Royal Academy. I feel slightly naked tonight. You notice I'm not wearing my medal. But in spirit, this is the Royal Academy for this evening. There's a tremendous cliche lurking here, which is someone who needs no introduction. So I'm carefully not saying that. But instead, the words he does deserve are words of welcome and honor for his courage and his spirit as an artist. There are two people I'm introducing to you tonight. And the first is Tim Marlow. He is the Royal Academy Artistic Director. He's a well-known broadcaster, curator, and writer. He's also, as you can tell from his figure, a very keen cyclist. And when we went in today to look up at the great bicycle chandelier, he was giving it a really appraising look. Now, Weiwei has been enormously generous with his time and in speaking. And the other night, Tim was introducing him to a group of our friends and supporters, and he said, I'm going to ask a big favor now. He said, I would like Weiwei to say 10 words. And Weiwei came to the podium and said, here are my 10 words. Thank you 5 times. Which shows through his grasp of mathematics that he's also an architect. Now, this must be very brief from me, because really you want to hear Tim and Weiwei. But lastly, I want to say something else about him. I think this exhibition, it was said to me by another very distinguished artist last night, I think this exhibition is clearly very special. It's epoch-making. It may be the exhibition of the decade. I'm looking at you here, Norman. We've had great, great exhibitions at the Royal Academy in the past. This is another. The Academy's changing. It's a great moment for the Academy. What I'm saying to you is, this is a great artist. The Academy was made for greatness. Now some of you may think that's hyperbole, but I'm an artist, and I mean it. Anyway, welcome, Ai Weiwei, Tim.
Weiwei, I know in the last year or so, you've spent a lot of time thinking back to childhood because you're writing a book, in part, about your father, the very great poet, Ai Ching. What was your first memory of art? What was the first artwork you became aware of? Are you conscious of that?
I cannot really clearly remember one work. And that's a time art are not an artist or artworks cannot be proud of. In fact, my father would never wish I become an artist, because all his punishment is because he's a writer, he's a poet. And in that society, for decades, whoever is artist or writers, poet, are punished because it's independent thinking or the ideas which not exactly like party's line.
So, when you were in exile in northwest China with him and your mother, he actively discouraged you from being an artist. What did he want you to be?
He actually, that time when parents look at their children, they have no idea or no wish. The state would take care of everything, and my position, I only can become a farmer. Become a worker is already very high prestige, and also you cannot become a soldier. That has to be trusted. So I think become a farmer is the only possibility, and which I grew up as a farmer. I do all the farming works, and besides helping my father to clean up the toilet, he's the person clean the public toilet.
That was his job. That was his rehabilitation.
Yeah, that's his job, and there's 13 public toilets in this whole village, and I has to keep. He did very good job. He make it very clean, extremely clean. Yes, because he's a poet. He's really very precisely, very honestly to do his job. I really admire his ability to put his proudness away and to really make every toilet, public toilet in China is very messy. Many of them has no roofs and the flies all over, and actually people don't use toilet papers. There's no papers there, and you also cannot use newspapers because all the newspapers print Chairman Mao's slogans. So if they find a newspaper being used, that's can be so-called anti-revolution act, which is it's not joking. It's not a, and it's really a serious matter. So,
what age were you when you were aware that your family living effectively in a hole in the ground and your father cleaning lavatories, this was a form of punishment or rehabilitation rather than the life that you had naturally been born into and it happened to everyone? I mean, was this something you realised when you were very young, or did it take you to your teens to realise exactly what was happening?
Oh, it started from maybe 9 or 10 years old when Cultural Revolution just happened. And everything became more dramatic, So my father was punished when I was born. So I was born with my family in very bad condition. He studied art and poetry in Paris in the 1930s. After he came back to China, he was arrested, in jail for years. Then he went to Yan, and the communists won take over the power. Then he became a part of establishment, but at the same time he became criticized as a rightist because he can never really be part of the party. And but being an individual is very dangerous in that society.
Did he talk to you about Mao? I mean, they were close for a time.
Yeah, when I grew up, in my family have many personal letters writing by Mao. It's all handwriting, and by other communist members, and they were very close when they were in Yan'an in the 1940s. And later, of course, the party decided all the so-called intellectuals or artists are dangerous to their control.
So when did you realize that you wanted to be an artist? Was this after the return to Beijing, after Mao's death in 1976, or was it before that when you were in exile?
In that society, when I grew up, there's no person called artist. We call it art workers. So that it means if you come, the university is closed. So if you are trained as art workers, you do the propaganda posters, or you work in the film theater, but also propaganda film posters. That's all you need to do. And of course, I don't want to be part of it. But by the time I graduated from high school, Chairman Mao died, and the whole situation became loose. my father's friends started to teach me, which is I learned because I don't want to go back to the farming. This is which all my classmates want to become farmers. And so it's kind of escape from the situation. But I never really so passionate. It's just something you have to do. There should be excuse to not to become a farmer.
So you went to film school, and soon after that became part of an art scene, loosely connected with the Stars movement. Just before I ask you about that, did you ever think about being a poet, or was it too difficult being the son of such a distinguished poet, an important poet?
I always admire my father and all the writers.
And your mother was a writer too, I should say, wasn't she?
Yeah, she's kind of amateur, but my father is more profound, and in our bookshelves there's a lot of poetry. So at an early age, I really appreciate we do have those poetries by all translated foreign poems, and that for me is like highest human activity, to write down your mind and to use your imagination and language. Yeah, but I never think to become a poet because, again, the society is very political, it's to touch any private feelings or we're not used to it.
You said things were loosening up, the modernizations, the four modernizations, but not democracy. But nonetheless, after the breakthrough, certainly that's the way art historically it's told, of the Stars movement, eventually the exhibition was allowed to happen. But there was a crackdown, and that coincided with you going to America. Was it a decision to escape or get away from a society that was starting to censor again, or were there other reasons for you to go to America?
To escape from the political situation, that's why I made decision to leave, to go to the United States, because I'm so disappointed. I think the society will never let any ideas or discussions. A friend of mine was sentenced for over 10 years only because they are asking some questions. They're just a little bit older than me, over 20 years old, but they are heavily punished. So have that kind of experience, I feel the danger can be very horrifying because I realize I will be very, I already have a strong sense of criticizing, to give out my opinions on politics.
Did you come into direct conflict with the authorities?
No, not at that moment. I try to escape. That's all I want to do.
And what did your parents say? What did your father say in particular when you said you were going to America?
I have to turn off my phone, sorry.
I thought you were going to Instagram.
Yeah, that's I changed my
free.
mind. I just have to do one, Sorry. Okay.
Marvellous.
Then turn off my phone. Sorry. I'll send it later.
So your father, what did he say when you were going to America?
My father said he's kind of cynical about because he has been through all those, and he said when we went out that time, and we all want to learn and come back. I said to myself that's your generation. I will never come back.
So you went to America and were there for 12, 13 years, and for most of that time you thought you wouldn't come back.
No.
And what made you come back? Your father? Illness?
Well, that's an excuse. My father was ill, and I thought if I don't use that excuse, I really don't have an excuse to come back. But the time when I was in the United States, how to say it? I was young and I was very passionate, but I do feel I'm not integrated into New York. In the 80s, all those cultural activities. Even I go to see all the shows, art shows, and went to poetry reading, and do have a lot of friends in Lower East Side. But I still don't think the society need me, or I cannot be really contribute anything there. So basically I'm just doing nothing. I just do all kind of job to get a few bucks and pay the rent. And I hate to open the envelope from AT&T or all those bills. It just I just don't like it. It's very hard for me to yeah.
I don't want to take you through your entire life, but but I do want to just ask you. There's a few questions about influence in a minute, but I do want to ask you about the art education you underwent in New York, because I didn't realize until recently that you were taught for a time by Richard Pousset Dart. But your first teacher was Sean Scully, the distinguished academician. I'd love you to verify publicly your first encounter with Sean Scully. I want to hear it from you as to whether or not his account is the same as your account. What happened at Parsons on that first day?
That first day he walked in, he was young and very tall and speak Scottish or Irish language.
Irish
and,
London, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't understand that well. But that doesn't matter because he directly walked into a very tall blonde girl and talked to her the whole morning,
Right, you didn't tell me that. That's one thing.
Which I wouldn't feel bothered because I don't really need him that much. And then the whole semester seems that tradition, that pattern, he just always talk to that girl. And occasionally he would walk to my spot.
And what happened when he did start to talk to you? Didn't you make a painting to show him?
I made a painting. I made life drawing. At that time, I can put a large piece of rice paper, use ink and brush. 15 minutes, I can make very well done, drawings. Then I look at the other students. They're still working with, cannot finish one finger, and the paper is already broken. They erase everything. But then the students start to standing around me and said, this guy can make drawing like this, it's really discouraging, So he come to me, he said, this is the worst painting I ever see. I kind of understand because I'm kind of like showcase, and it's no sincerity. It's really a great scale, and so I learned lessons from him. Yeah.
The beginning of a great friendship, or at least he was a good teacher in that respect.
He's not a good teacher. He would print out, the pages from a different poet or Van Gogh or all those writers. It's just one sentence, another sentence. It makes you very confused.
I don't want to tell tales out of school. He said that after saying that, worst painting he's ever seen, I think he claims that you said he was the best teacher he ever had.
Okay. Which is true. I only had 2 teachers. And but I told him he will be remembered because me.
Yeah. He's got a good sense of humour, Sean. Wonderful. So, back in China, back in Beijing, You said to me when we were talking a few months ago about the show, when I first talked to you, that you didn't really think of yourself as an artist till you came back from America. That's for you where everything began. But of course, in America, you encountered Warhol, Johns, but in particular Duchamp, and the hanging man, the profile of Duchamp that's in the exhibition. Is Duchamp, is he still an influence for you, or is he an artist that you quickly work through?
I would say maybe for 1 month I was very fascinated by this man, and still I think he's very intelligent, and I like his style and his understanding about art. But that was it, and yeah.
And did Duchamp unlock doors for you? Did you? I mean, was the idea that all materials could be potentially used for art?
Oh yes.
Was that already there, or did Duchamp suggest that to you?
I think Duchamp did that. Most importantly, his work in relating to literature, poetry, surrealism are more relate to poet than other type of art. And the Dada, I think, is very, very important. I'm very happy to see someone said, burning a museum is more important than establish one. So I still admire those people.
And I think one or two people, well, a lot of people have said, walking around the exhibition here in London, those who've seen your work on any scale for the first time, that also you must have learnt or at least worked through the language of American or Western minimalism. Did Judd and Andre strike chords with you in New York?
Yeah, Judd, Andre, and just the conceptual artists. All those made a very strong impact on me, I should say.
Why did you never paint? Maybe it was Sean, but you stopped painting quite strongly before you went. But we wanted to include some early paintings in the exhibition. You were very clear, no, we start in sort of early 90s, 93. But are you tempted now to go back to painting?
No, I will never paint again, but I was very good painter, and but each time I moved too many times in New York. Each time I moved, my room getting smaller, and the first thing I have to throw out is my paintings. So I remember there's a show, I take off my paintings, I directly, when I walk out the gallery, I throw into this very large garbage truck, because, it's silly to carry it in the city, it looks so sad, and, And my first show, and I couldn't even sell one work. So I told the gallery dealer, I said, how about I sell 6 works for $300, which I was very happy.
And they were the Duchamp profiles?
Yes.
Very good deal, he did, I think.
It's better than throw it away, so.
Is there a work, or is there a body of work that you feel represented a breakthrough? Not all artists think in this way, and it is more of an art historian's thing. That, the books you started publishing when you came back to Beijing, or the first furniture pieces, or the Hanging Man series you begun in New York. Did one particular body of work seem to you a breakthrough, that when you suddenly felt you had your own voice?
Maybe my next work, it's, it's truly, never satisfied with anything I did. But one thing I really feel I'm fortunate is I can get on the internet. One state-owned company opened a blog for me. That time I cannot type. I don't know how to use computer. But I started to. That's 2005. That really that knocked me out. I would spend a day and night on computer and just writing something and discussions. And all those experiences later got me involved with the works like Sichuan or earthquake works and the other sense. Of course, I was detained only because I got too popular in the, blogs and all those writings. So that is breakthrough. But the other sense, I think, is very normal. Almost every artist does it,
The authorities, after 2 years, closed your blog down. You now Instagram. Some would say that the image is more powerful than words, but would you blog and tweet again if it were opened up to you in China, or that's something you've now worked through, the image now speaks?
I think I work through, and I think I still like to work on images or something material or some physical beings. I think that's interesting to work with. Yeah.
In the 90s and at the beginning of the new millennium, you had established a pattern of working that was both, very physical and sculptural. You were working with all sorts of different materials, but you were collecting, you were archiving, then you started to blog, and architecture, which is something I want to come on to shortly. So the trajectory, the pattern of your work has been expansive. Will that continue, or will there come a point in your life where you'll start to focus on fewer activities, or do you see yourself becoming more varied as you evolve or get older?
I think I'm becoming more and more uncontrollable, But my time is up, I don't have much time to be uncontrollable, so I don't worry about it.
You mentioned the earthquake piece and the Sichuan earthquake, and it is an amazingly powerful piece, and this is one of the pieces, but I think perhaps above all, it's the piece that people who've never seen it or experienced it feel moved by here in London, certainly in the beginning of the show. When the earthquake happened, and then a friend of yours said to come down, you had no sense of necessarily going down there as an artist. You went down there as an activist trying to draw attention to a problem. Is that right? Did art suggest itself quickly when you were down there?
Actually, being artist, since I read Duchamp from very early, 80s, then later I have no question I'm an artist. So it's like we don't walk every step to talk about gravity, So I have no doubt it's artists, whatever do, Also, I admire the artist who doesn't have to think he's artist, So I act as a human being or an individual which responds to the social matters. And, it may not be successful or whatever. It's just my very natural instinct.
What was your first reaction when you went down to Sichuan? Were you angry?
No, I'm not angry. I just standing in these big piles of those, ruins. Then you sense the death in the wind, in the air. I never had that. Physically, I was shaking. I'm a very strong man. I have been through all kind of emotions. But when you sense there's thousands of students under those stones or medals, it's just strange experience. Then I thought I have to do something to really to identify with that kind of feeling. So it takes years and come up some kind of form. It's very reduced effort and to just quietly to state my my emotion or mind.
So the first thing you did was start to gather this register of children, of students who'd been killed because of the corrupt and inadequate building regulations. Is that register still ongoing? Are people still sending in names?
No, later after I kept publishing daily about the student's name we discovered. It pushed the states in a very fragile condition because there's so much power in those names we discovered with their birthday, and the states cannot hide it anymore. So they openly give us cracks and how many people was dead. They know exact number, which was 5,335. So our discovery already reached 5,219. Then we realized we can never get the rest, a few dozen names, because they are kindergarten, 4 years old child, and there's nobody remember who they are, and some of them are parents also dead. There's just no way to find it. So.
And then you also acquired, as they were clearing the rubble, 200 tons of this mangled rebar, and it was transported up to Beijing. Sorry to ask such a mundane question, but was it easy to acquire this rebar? I mean, you were already starting to come into conflict with the authorities. They'd tried to stop you listing names. You've just said eventually they had to acknowledge that you were doing that. How did you get the rebar? I mean, you'd be a marked man. Obviously, other people had to acquire it for you.
We are very good investigator. If you never get the answer, you can become very good investigator. So I do documentary films. Also, we record. Our team has been arrested a few dozen times, and all our research details are being erased or photos being deleted. But still, we managed to document everything. Because the internet, we can always write diaries and interview. We did interview with hundreds, victims' parents or their relatives, and I realized there's some kind of working unit collects those metals to resell to factory so they can
recycle.
Yeah, recycle it. So of course everything is very sensitive. We have to do it very carefully, but we did manage to get all those metals from one school location, which have over 1,000 students under the roof, under the crabbles.
Do any of the parents of the children who were killed there, do any of them or many of them know the work you have made straight? Do they know what happened to that rebar? Do they know what you did to it? Or is that something that would never permeate that part of China?
They all know I did documentary films, research, and students' names, but I don't think they know the rebars, because my situation each day become even worse. So then I got arrested. So after I was released, while walking, you have been in that studio. So first time I approached the studio after I was released, I hear this sound of people, trying hammering and straightening those metals. That was the most happy moment. That never stopped. So it takes years for those people make it straight. Each metal each piece will take about 200
blows.
Yeah, to make it like factorily just produced piece.
And where did the idea? I mean, you got it back in the studio. Where did the idea to straighten it out come from? Was it the idea of just starting to try and restore it to how it was originally, and then think what you might do with it?
No, I tried to, first I tried to, I think those metals already do have some kind of meaning in there. it's not only evidence, but also it's in my position. So I want to find a way to display them. So yes, there's many possibilities. I may try a few, but this is a final version of what we did.
So the material, in a sense, starts to speak. You're allowing the material to speak. There's obviously an act of transformation, but it's less transformative than the carving pieces, for example. I think people are very curious about all your work leaving China, but in particular, after you've been released from prison and then you're under house arrest and then you have no passport, that piece was transported to Venice, along with Sacred, the other large piece, the Venice Biennale of 2 years ago. Were you surprised that the work left China, that the authorities had no idea what this material was, where it came from, and the impact that it would have as a memorial?
That particular piece shaped out not as artwork. It's just materials. Whoever say it, it's just materials. Of course, any work come out has to have permissions, but nobody even think. Thanks, our culture administration, they will never believe that can be artwork.
But a marble-carved surveillance camera, how is that allowed to leave?
That also will not consider as artwork. It's a copy of, a civilian camera.
So, on the level of censorship and customs...
Actually, only in Royal Academy, those looks like art.
I love the idea that there's a kind of, if not a moral authority, that the censors and the customs officers, they're the judges, they're the arbiters of whether something is art or not.
If you tell them this is artwork, they wouldn't believe you, think you lie to them.
Which answers the question then as to how everything has ever got out.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense of, because until your release, until your passport was given back, you were meeting...
That's why all my work doesn't really look like artwork. It's really because it's... I have to really pass that, that's... Now you forgive me.
I love the fact that the Duchampian gesture is still subversive, but it's a way of getting past the customs and so on. But until your release, you were seeing the police and the security services every week or so. You had regularly to visit once you were released. Was there any sense that they were either aware of or interested in the impact that your work was having around the world?
I don't really think so. They talked to me in very plain language. Very honestly, they said, we realize the Western anti-China force using you, and if they buy your art, that's the way they launder the money to support democratic movement. It's not because you're artist. We all know you are. They still don't believe I'm an artist, which is, it's very, very similar with some critics here. In a way, I'm very happy about it.
I have to say the British critics have been almost universal in their love of you, but I know there was one article, a preview, that described your work as art for lazy Western curators, which I thought was more an insult to us curators than to you, the artist, actually.
Yeah. And another said if Ai Weiwei should not be punished for his political activists, he should punish for his art. So I think that's the best art critic I ever read. This is really wonderful. And that's happened in England, so that's so good.
We've mentioned, and people are very curious to hear about the impact of your time in jail. You were jailed for 81 days. You said clearly on occasion that you'd no idea how long you were going to be held. it's something that we're all thinking about.
Are we talking about art here?
Yes, we are. We are. Because everyone here who's seen Sacred in the Academy has then been sort of made to confront your memory, at least, of what it was you went through. When you were in prison, was the idea that you might, I don't mean this tritely either, that all experience can be used for art, but was it one of the ways you hung on to sanity, or keeping your mind, that thinking that one day you would be able to use some of this, hopefully, to make art? Or was art the last thing on your mind when you were
That's the lesson in my mind, because all the interrogations is about subversion of state power. And they read my blog writings, which is really terrible. If I listen for them to read, or they often let me read it again. And they would ask, each sentence or each vocabulary, what does that mean? I told them this is plain Chinese language, if they want me to rewrite it, to correct it. So it's a very painful process, but seems not so many people interested in art. And whenever they start asking my art, they think, why you cannot stop? Once I realize this. They always telling me, whenever we ask you about art, you cannot stop. You just keep talking. And if we ask you something else, you will always say, I don't remember, or it's very strange. They have the impression somehow I'm not very balanced.
You seem remarkably balanced, given what you've been through. There are many reasons, I think, to make Sacred, but was it a form of catharsis, the idea of purging, of trying to psychologically was it a form of you trying to deal with what you'd been through?
I have been through very, very extreme condition. I always have to ask myself why I never been beaten in there. I was treated very well. I have meals regularly almost on the minutes. I have to have the meal, and I have normally every act. They always look at their watches, like 9 o'clock. You have to get in your bed, but if you take shower a little bit faster, so you have 5 minutes left. They would ask you how many minutes you use for a shower. I would every day I would say 8 minutes, and then I would have 3 minutes to wash my underwear, because that's you like to do it, because that's some kind of normal activity you still can do. Otherwise, you're just sitting there like this, and they are standing right in front of you and stare at you and no talk. So you love to wash underwear, because this is really some normal activity you can do. That's only occasion. But if you did a little bit too quick, then you will have your whole body wet and standing next to the bed, because you cannot immediately go to the bed, because there's 2 civilian cameras watching them. By that minutes, you can lay down, and so on all the civilian screens with no movement in any room. I guess there's many rooms, so it's really a very strict military situation.
With guards always a meter or less away from you?
80 centimeters away, standing just like the guards standing from your royal family there. It's very stiff, without even blink. It's very uniformed, and and I have to sleep the way my hands has to be out of a blanket, facing up. I cannot turn, and if I make a turn, they would stop me. So
when you see these 6 pieces now, do they help distance from that? Do they bring it all back? Are they part of your psychological
Why I did
coping?
that because I have so much time just look at the patterns of the ground, and because I have too many time. And suddenly I have, all the time, and I would calculate the size of the room, or what kind of size of their shoes, all those things. Just all you can do to keep your mind alive. And after I come out, it's very hard for me to describe because I realize every Chinese would ask me, or Western journalists would say, what it's like, So it's very hard to describe the situation. So I make the piece exactly as the condition. There's no slightly different or twisted. No, exactly.
Was it? I never know. Was it made explicitly to be shown in Venice, or were you making it and then it felt like when the opportunity arose, it would be great to show it in a church in Venice? Because it has very strong Christian overtones, altarpieces, Stations of the Cross, and so on. I'm curious about what you knew when you started making it as to where it was shown.
I could explain to my co-artist workers what I would achieve in those kind of situation. I would tell them just like in the art history museum when you talk about the early monkeys or houses, and it has to be realistic. And of course, in my mind is also the images in the church. You see the Bible stories, but since China doesn't have those kind of story, I only can use the other image. And so I think the image would explain more than otherwise. So.
But did you know when you started making it that it was going to be shown in a church?
No, I never. We make most of our works just for the reason I think I should make it. I don't know if we can really shape it out, or we don't know where to use it.
It feels very different at the Royal Academy, and part of the reason is the space, but also the context. You recontextualize it with the wallpaper. Seems to me slightly more secular. You take away from the church, but what was the thinking behind that wallpaper as a setting for sacred?
First, I studied the Royal Academy in architecture, and as an architect, I really want to have something. Always want my work in response to architecture. And we designed this wallpaper. I think it's perfect to fit into this condition, and also would reduce this kind of these 6 boxes. It's kind of a little bit too sad, but the wallpaper is more cheerful and it's kind of.
It makes you feel slightly more anarchic as well, in a way, because there's a kind of visual chaos.
Yeah. I think it's I'm very satisfying with that room. I don't want people to be too sad in that room.
Difficult. I just want to make it clear that you mentioned architecture. You've built some extraordinary buildings. Your studio. You built a monument to your father. You've built galleries and other artist studios in Chaoshangdi. You virtually established an artist colony there. And obviously, when we started talking about the exhibition and worked on it together, and along with Adrian Locke, we didn't think you were going to be able to travel. So you work from plans, and then you had some film footage of the galleries. When you were able to travel, and now you are able to travel, will you still work in the same way? In other words, being able to work on an exhibition from afar, you haven't changed much, if anything, of the plans that you devised for the exhibition, which shows the architectural thinking, I think, to a certain extent. But do you like the idea of being able to move objects around in rooms to make an exhibition, or have you always worked in more in the manner of an architect, looking at plans, thinking about spatial relationships, and then that's how the work is? It's more calculated.
I like to work in remote way. I would like to imagine the situation and imagine how it will be. it's kind of joy in there. But of course, I like to have my rights to travel. But now I think by not to have rights to travel, I also can concentrate very well. And if there's 10 exhibitions, each exhibition would take away of 2 or 3 weeks, the minimum. Then the whole year will be ruined by just go to the exhibitions. So my team has been, they passport all 4 of the visas from all over the world, and except me. So this time when they see me, visit me in an exhibition room in Royal Academy, they really feel uncomfortable because they are very used to I'm not there. They feel very strange. Why is this guy here?
It's a really interesting point because you've made nearly 100 exhibitions in the 5 years you haven't travelled. And I wonder if you'd been able to travel, whether you could possibly have made that number of shows. You seem to say, no, probably not.
It'll be only 25 exhibitions, maybe.
And when you came to London and saw the work installed, because a lot of it was, some of it was still being fabricated or installed in situ, and a lot of those pieces have to be built in the galleries. But was it pretty well as you imagined? No, don't mean emotionally, I'll come on to that in a minute, but physically and spatially, was it was like walking through your own imagination thinking, yep, this is how I thought it would be?
I would say exactly like I imagined. Some works maybe I moved 2 centimeters. So
the pots.
Yeah, I just want to, otherwise Royal Academy would feel regret to invite me here. So I said, that one has to be,
If you'd wanted to move straight by about 2 centimeters, that would have been quite difficult, I think. Yeah.
Yes, that would be the problem.
But what about how emotional, or what was your emotional response to seeing an exhibition of your work for the first time in 5 years?
To tell the truth, I don't even believe it. I really feel dissident from my work, which is, I think it's kind of achievement, you don't feel it's yours. It's like a child, you never growing up not with you, then the first time you met him, you can think it's really my child, it's kind of that kind of feeling, I'm still not very adjusted to say this is my work or something, no.
Does this moment in your life and career, after a long period of not travelling and now you're travelling, does it feel like things will change significantly for you in the way that you might work, in the way that the kinds of works you might make, or will that not fundamentally alter the themes, the trajectory, the interest you have as an artist?
It's amazing you can ask the same question twice without the words change. That's really amazing, After a man talks all time and never stops, but well, I couldn't find the same answer. That's why I feel a little bit strange, Yeah. But I would think maybe I would have some impact if I can travel, because I have to dealing with all kind of strange schedules. Also, I can meet the Western, the factory and the producers. This is very, very different kind of skill and very different kind of time span when they're working. In China, it takes 3 months. Here, it could take a year to finish one piece. So, it will be different.
Do you have any reason to believe that you won't be allowed back to China? In other words, you're confident in a few weeks when you decide when you go back to Beijing that will be fine. You'll be able to then spend time in Beijing and come back to Berlin and travel freely between both cities. Is that likely?
We are educated to trust our motherland. So I still have that habit, I always think if they told me I'm a free person, I can be traveled back and forth, so I believe them.
Final question before I throw you to the floor. And please feel free to ask the same question for the third time and see if we can get an answer. That'd be brilliant. Because I began by asking you about your father and knowing he was very much on your mind in the last year or so. But of course, you are also a father. Your son, Ai Weiwei, was at the opening yesterday. It was delightful to see him there. He's young, 6.5. You've been away from him for a year or a year and a half, and I know that was a difficult thing. But has fatherhood significantly changed your attitudes or the way that you work?
It make me a little bit soft, I should say.
Soft, vulnerable?
Vulnerable, and I realize my weak point, I think, yeah.
And did the authorities use that explicitly as leverage? Did they threaten that if you didn't behave or you didn't do what they wanted to do, you would never see your son? Or was that always implicit?
I think they don't have to do that, because if I don't behave, I will not see myself even. So there's no question about it.
One final question. Have there been any conditions attached to you being given your passport? In other words, are there certain things that you've been told you mustn't do, or were you just given the passport back in the end?
No, because they know me and they know I'm not a kind of person who can accept any conditions for exchange for freedom, or, this is not possible. So.
Great. I mean, that was a very emphatic answer. Thank you. So 10 minutes, microphones, if you can just wait for them. Questions, let's start with Norman Rosenthal, and then I'll take questions around there. Norman, just wait. Would you?
It's the most fantastic, and sorry, I think I've got quite a loud voice.
You have, Norman.
It's really already
It's great to hear it.
A loud voice. It's the most fantastic and elegant exhibition. But I'd like to ask you something a little bit more general, because you are obviously in the tradition of Joseph Beuys, and in a curious way also Andy Warhol in the way he worked, a political artist in a very special sense. But also beyond that, there's the whole issue of politics in the world, and even more than that, what I call understanding between the ways, what I call the thinking ways. I remember when we did an exhibition at the Royal Academy in my time about Ming Dynasty culture, which was very beautiful. It was fantastic. But there was an incredible difficulty for Western people, at least for myself, to understand the thought processes of the people that I met in China, or at least the officials that I met in China. Do you think there are incredible difficulties of understanding between East and West? And you're a person who's lived in the West, so you are a Western person, but you're obviously a person who understands totally Chinese culture. You're in a very special position. But do you think you can shed some light on the difficulties of understanding that exist culturally between the Western world and the Chinese world?
It's obviously a very different world, a very different kind of culture. And it's still extremely difficult for Chinese like me. I'm quite old, and also I'm very much related to culture for 2 generations at least, to really analyze or to give a very distinct discussion on that matter, because it takes quite a long time or many details, but it's dramatically different culture, and it's so.
Is language very important in this respect?
I think language plays a great role in there, and I think the fundamental difference is West development has a trust in science development in the past few centuries, and China never really trusted science or scientific development. they are more emotional, they are more mystical. They're, the way it's really related to family, really to the old habit, old culture.
But one of the spin-offs from what Norman said is, I mean, you might describe your work as a conversation between those two cultures. Is that a fair comment?
Actually, that's what I would try to get rid of. I never want to combine this, to combine Chinese wine with Western beer, or I think it would not. Huh?
Can things change, or is it forever like that?
It's very hard to change. China, you can see the struggle in the political and economic struggles in recent years. You can see the resistance of change. And this is a very difficult situation.
Let's take another question. Norman's very eloquent, but Weiwei said recently he'd never met anyone who talked more than me. And then he said, apart from Hans Ulrich Obrist, now there's Norman as well. I'm now number 3 on the list. It's brilliant. Okay, other question? Yeah. Can we just have the mic? Sorry, because it's just being live screened as well. Sorry about that. Wait for the mic if you don't mind.
You said that social media was a very good way of taking action and getting information out that we otherwise wouldn't hear about. Are you sure that it wasn't our protest about you being in prison that they couldn't keep you in there for any longer? I mean, there was massive protests here through Facebook and Twitter and so on. Do you think that really might have made them release you?
I think it made a big difference, and of course, I believe in those sense, because I don't believe, in ghost or some spirit. But I think that's something you can touch, and at least it reaches so many people, and make them believe this would help. And I'm one of them. People always ask me if this kind of mass protection may hurt you, may make them even don't want to release you. I always tell them, just do it, I can stay there if I know there's people who still fighting for the same value. I will be happy to stay there. Yeah.
But it's interesting, certain Western commentators have said how that was obviously very important, but that as far as the Chinese authorities are concerned and the party, there's not that much concern about what the rest of the world thinks. It's how it plays out in China. Is that broadly speaking true?
I don't. Even maybe they will give an image like that, but I don't believe that's true, because China cannot survive without West. This is very clear. China become China today because the need of the global situation. So especially today, nobody would believe that.
Next question. Someone up there. Yeah. So someone was just having a drink. I thought that was it. Yeah. There we go.
We're really in great admiration of your strength against all the things that have the oppressions. If your son, who is now 6.5 in 10 years' time, shared our admiration and wanted also to be an activist, would you encourage him?
I would think I should make a better effort not to let him to have same kind of problem. And if it still remains the same, of course I would encourage him to do the right thing.
Weiwei told me a lovely story that I asked if Weiwei couldn't come to London, as seemed likely, would his mother come? Because she came to Venice and to open the show, which is wonderful. And he said that his mother was perhaps too frail and old now. And I said, would his son come? And he told me that Ai Weiwei didn't like London because when he was put in prison, they told him as a very little boy that his daddy had gone to London. It was brilliant to see him here, and he's forgiven London. Okay, a couple more questions, yeah. Sorry to be, just if you could wait for the mic. There. Yeah, thank you.
Firstly, Weiwei, I would love to know how old the tea is.
It still smells so delicious, and such a good advertisement for China tea. But on a more serious note, we're very concerned about Tibet. How do you feel, how do the people in China feel about the oppression of the Tibetan people?
So maybe I should just answer the second question. Tibet and also some related situation like minority situations. And today is a result of this whole system. This is if the system is not changed, the political situation is not changed, I don't think Tibet has a chance to the condition would change. So it's very sad situation, but I think it's lacking of communication, lacking of sincerely understanding of humanity or respect of different culture and language. And this not only happened to Tibetan people, but also happens to Chinese. It's just the general condition.
It's time for one more question. Eliza, just in the foreground. And while the mic's going over, how old is the tea?
The tea, I don't really remember. It's not. I cannot give you a precise time, but it's not very old. It looks old.
Could I ask you something about architecture? Maybe if you could say something about how similar or how different your thinking process is between thinking about a building or thinking about a piece of work, an artwork.
Architecture has fundamentally, for me, it's has strong value, aesthetic, and moral judgment in there, and also can be very philosophical, or the argument around architecture. So in that sense, it relates to art, and I never really separated it. But it's only different way. It's like this because it's applied art, so you can always make argument about is that really useful, or is it's so the judgment of what involved with how well it being used, or who is going to use it, and all those things. So
it's great that Eliza asked the final question. Eliza Bonham Carter's head of the Royal Academy Schools. Weiwei's been made a professor in Berlin, and he's going to do some teaching there, but he's very kindly agreed to come and do a day or two's teaching at the Royal Academy Schools. I hope you don't tell the students that they're the worst painters you've ever seen, but obviously feel free to be tough. Weiwei, you've been an extraordinary, generous presence the whole of the 9 days you've been here. I promised you only an hour tonight, and we've done an hour and 10 minutes, so I've nearly broken my promise again, but only just. I do want to say that tomorrow your last public act, which is something that you have devised with Anish Kapoor, will start at the Royal Academy at 10 o'clock in the morning. And Anish and Weiwei are going to walk from the Academy through the City of London out to Stratford, bearing witness to the current problems about refugees. And everyone and anyone is welcome to join.
Yes, I hope tomorrow is not raining, and today, because I have to come here, I have no chance even buy a walking shoe. My shoes are wet.
To be honest, wearing my commercial hat, I hope it pours down with rain, because we're selling Ai Weiwei umbrellas for 25 quid in the Royal Academy shop. Anyway, on which terribly cynical note, can I thank you all for coming, but in particular to Ai Weiwei for joining us. Thank you so much.